So like many, I've been playing around with Stasis a lot. I've been playing with the Revenant Hunter subclass, and I'm completely in love with this subclass. No, I don't think it's overpowered per se, and I'm actually pretty impressed with its balancing. It seems like there's an ample amount of risk and reward execution with your abilities and decision making, and a pretty high skill ceiling given the wide toolbox it has and the versatility of it. And although for some that might be a controversial statement, that's not going to be the focus of this video, maybe one in the future. But today, in this video, I'll be talking about how to properly play the Hunter Revenant class and how to best take advantage of the majority of its abilities and its toolbox. Let's keep in mind we are missing part of the class. There is an aspect in the database that we are missing that's not currently in the game as far as I'm aware, and although I have the majority of the fragments, that can definitely change the way that you build this class, because I'm assuming the other aspect is going to be the dodge to slow. So let's talk about the three main ways you can build this class and play it. The first way is going all in on Shatter and using the Shatter dive mainly. The second way is going to be surrounding slowing targets as frequently as possible and possibly freezing them from stacking slows. The third way would be more of a middle ground that utilizes slowing when possible but isn't the main focus, and probably not freezing targets as frequently, but also using the Shatter Dive to deal some massive damage as well. So before I simply list out class setups with your fragment choices, ability choices, your exotics, stat splits, etc., I'm gonna go over each individual ability and the importance of those abilities, and then it'll come together when we talk about the actual complete loadout setup. Let's start by talking about the Withering Blade. These are your Stasis Shurikens. You get 2 charges of them, which is pretty cool. They do a bit of damage as well on impact, not quite as much as a throwing knife, but they do have tracking that is somewhat similar, but maybe not as aggressive as the Sentinel Shield. The most important thing to know about these is that they deal 6 stacks of slow when impacting a target. Let's take a quick pause here and talk about how slow exactly works. When you slow a target, they can't double jump, their mobility is limited of course, but it also reduces their accuracy, which means their accuracy cone. You thought I wasn't going to talk about cones in this video? You were wrong. Their accuracy cone becomes pretty wide, which means their bullets aren't guaranteed to go straight. But perhaps the most important thing to know about the slow system is that it's actually a stack-based system, and different things that slow targets deal a different amount of stacks. And the stacks are important because the goal of slowing someone, other than limiting their mobility and accuracy of course, is to get them to 10 stacks, where they then freeze. In the context of our Stasis Shuriken here, on impact it deals 6 stacks of slow, which means if you rapidly fire 2 at a target, which you can do with this, you will then freeze them, if both land of course. This presents you with an interesting dynamic. Do I try and double throw at people rapidly, which is a little bit more risky, but a little bit more reward individually to get them frozen? Or do I try and keep one on hand at all times, going for perhaps a little less reward or potential, not freezing them, but disabling a target's mobility to either stop them from rushing me or to open up a push for myself? Or maybe you don't full commit the majority of the time with double Shuriken because you want to utilize on adding up with your teammates' stacks of slow to then freeze targets together. There's not one single correct answer, and I would say it's situational, but these are the things that you have to be thinking about when you have your Shurikens available. Now let's talk about our grenades, which are universal to each class, but they will have specific uses with this class on the Hunter. Firstly, the Glacier Grenade. This has an incredibly high versatility and high skill ceiling as a result. These can be used to instantly make cover for yourself, so if you're going up against someone that has cover and you don't have a good peek shot, you can use this to create a peek shot for yourself and play with cover against them. If you're in danger, someone's got good shots on you, you can use this as cover to try and stay alive as well, like a barricade of sorts. Or how about the fact that you can use this to create platforms for yourself to engage from a very unexpected angle or elevation? Not to mention you can throw these at your feet to launch yourself in the air like a super bounce, a really cool movement tech. The skill ceiling of these grenades are incredibly high. Next we have the Duskfield Grenade. This is probably the most consistent grenade of the 3. It has a massive field. It's great for zoning because it covers such a large area, but perhaps the best portions of this is the fact that it actually pulls the target when it does reach impact with the surface. It has an initial gravitational pull to it, which is incredible, and tries to hold them in place when slowing them. And on top of it, of course, as I just mentioned, it does apply stacks of slow progressively. This grenade lets you manipulate someone else's movement. What if they're flying at you with stompies? put it down near a wall and they're gonna fling towards that wall and away from you. What if they're behind a barricade? You can draw them out of your barricade by putting this in front of it and bringing them forward. What if they're behind cover? Third person peeking perhaps? Put it on the ground and it's gonna drag them out. Again, the name of the game with these grenades is the fact that you have the power to potentially manipulate someone else's movement. It's not necessarily about freezing that's valuable, it's the fact that you can manipulate their movement. Lastly, we have the cold snap grenades, and yeah, at the time of recording this video, these are probably the most overpowered grenades, and the reason being is because they take the least thought and they have the lowest amount of risk for the highest reward, which is essentially throwing them near a target of some sort, and they will track and freeze the target. And if you froze them, they're gonna try and track another target nearby, similar to an arc bolt, and freeze them as well and continually chain. They take, again, the lowest amount of thought, the lowest amount of risk for a very high reward. Now, although they take little to no thought and have a lot of impact, I do think the other two grenades have a higher skill ceiling associated with them. And that means they're going to potentially allow you to do more overall over the course of a game, but they're going to require you to think a little bit more about it. The cold snap grenades, in an ideal world, if these were addressed and not so strong and not so easy to use, then I think the other two grenades will see more play. Now let's talk about the first aspect on the Revenant, and that is Shatter Dive. This allows you to activate it mid-air to quickly descend and shatter nearby targets on impact. It's essentially a mid-air slam, kind of like Phoenix Dive, except you have more control over it, which I'll mention and talk about in a moment. The Shatter Dive is used for two things: shattering stasis crystals and dealing damage as a result, or as an evasive movement. The Shatter Dive can be used to quickly clear enemy stasis crystals to take away their cover or deal slight bits of damage to them, or detonate your own team's stasis crystals to deal some massive damage to targets, and we're going to talk about combos and more depth on that later on. But like I said, you can use this as an evasive movement as well because you can control the direction in which you descend. If you're in the air, you can use your movement controls to direct which way you want to descend, and it solves one of Hunter's biggest problems, which is after using the double jump, if you do use it in a bad scenario or you get caught and exposed, you have that moment of vulnerability where you're an easy target as you fall. This can get you back down to the ground and into cover very quickly. So let's think about some scenarios. What if we went for a jump snipe just a little bit out of cover, going for the jump shot, and then after taking the shot we can dive instantly back into cover? Or how about in a shotgun fight where you're using your hunter jump to try and play your elevation, you go for the shot, and then right after taking the shot, like you would on the ground with a hunter dodge, you dive right to the ground, using that again as a dodge effectively in the air to make it harder for your opponent to land a shot on you. Oh yeah, and I should probably mention that, yeah, you get damage resistance in this animation, so enjoy. At the peak of the dive, when you start the animation, probably the most vulnerable point, you get about 40% damage reduction, which is pretty crazy. Now, we do have another aspect slot, but I did mention we do not have a second aspect currently unlocked. However, in the database, there is an aspect that's called Winter Shroud, and it says dodging slows nearby targets. And well, we know about this because it's been mentioned in TWABs, previews, even in Vidocs. So this is probably pretty accurate, so we can assume that is our second aspect. Just a bit of speculation on how it'll work. I believe dodge is going to have a radius, probably 10 meters or so, that anything caught within that radius when you dodge will get a few stacks of slow. A big question for many people is going to be, can you freeze with 2 dodges, and whether that's you and a teammate or maybe just by yourself with 6 Coyote. I think with knowing what we know about the slow stack system and assuming and hoping this is well balanced, I don't believe you will be able to. I think that this is probably going to give you 4 stacks of slow, which 2 of those does not total 10, so it will not be a freeze, but it is enough to combine with your Shuriken, so you can then dodge for 4 stacks, Shuriken for 6, boom, frozen. But even just the act of dodging to slow gives you a very good defensive tool. If someone's rushing you, again, being able to dodge, be evasive, break that aim assist, and then also slow their mobility and counter that push is very, very strong. And also being able to go in, slide and shotgun, and then quickly dodge out to maintain evasiveness like many people do. If you don't convert on the kill, you can slow them or slow people around them. This has high potential to be a pretty strong defensive ability, but of course course we have to wait and see till we get our hands on it. Now, although I believe the super is pretty self-explanatory, I thought I'd go over this. Essentially, you throw 2 stasis commas, silence and squall. The first one is silence. This one is an instant flash freeze effect over a very generous area. You want to throw this at an area and it'll instantly freeze any targets within that area. And the second one is squall, which creates a stasis storm over time. It will slow targets caught in it and deal damage over time and eventually freeze them because of these stacks of slow that it deals. So when you're facing like normal targets, meaning non-super enemies, because this can be used as a shutdown as well, you just want to flash freeze them, then throw the squall as close to them as possible, of course, right on top preferably, and then you go clean up the kills and the squall will continue to help you clean up those kills if you don't finish them. If you're facing a super though, this is where it gets tricky. You have to flash freeze them so you do not have to direct hit, but the second one, the squall, has to be a direct hit on them or else they're going to be able to easily break out, because supers only get frozen for 1 second. It's a shorter duration than a normal player. So you're probably not going to be able to kill them or catch them again because the high mobility of supers, the squall is not going to catch them in most cases. When going up against other stasis supers that will freeze you, it's almost better to let them freeze you instead of trying to counter pop them. Reason being is because when you get frozen in the super, if you get frozen before the second throw, the squall throw, then it's just going to cancel you out of your super and you only get the flash freeze, which I mean probably did nothing if you're not getting the squall off against another super. So this means you can actually use your super to instantly break out a freeze. I don't know if a lot of people know that, but you can super cast to break out a freeze instantly, and then in this case, if it's another super, you can kind of counter them and shut them down. So essentially, let's say a warlock supers you, they freeze you, you pop silence and squall to get out of the freeze and then freeze them and guarantee that you're gonna get out your squall throw as well, which is much better. And this is pretty hilarious against other Hunter Revenants, because if they silence you first, then you pop to counter that and silence them, they're not gonna get their squall throw and you're gonna get yours. So that's kind of how you want to use the super. Now we have our fragments, which are just little perks that we can add on to the class that sometimes have stat modifiers or cooldown modifiers, and they're essentially there to increase the synergy of our build. I think the 4 best fragments for the Hunter are Whisper of Fissures, Whisper of Shards, Whisper of Refraction, and Whisper of Durance. The other 2, one of them is, I believe, a 25% damage buff for freezing an enemy for 10 seconds, I believe is not very likely to happen or frequent on Hunter, maybe on Warlock, sure, but not on Hunter, and I believe it's a win more. I think the other one gives super energy when killing frozen targets or something, but yeah, that one's another win more that I don't see a lot of point in either. But now, since we're talking about fragments, we can finally talk about the different ways to build this class, and we're going to start with the first way, which is building to shatter. The emphasis of building the class this way is focusing on using shatter damage to take out targets quickly and easily as both an aggressive tool and a defensive tool by using our own glacier grenades with shatter dive to cause massive detonations and lots of damage. For this build, of course, you want to be using the glacier grenade and focusing on using your shatter dive, and for fragments, you want to be using Whisper of Fissures, which increases the damage and size of the burst of stasis, the shatter damage, when you destroy a stasis crystal or defeat a frozen target. And for the next slot, we'll be using Whisper of Shards. Shattering a stasis crystal temporarily boosts grenade recharge rate. Shattering additional stasis crystals increases the duration of the benefit. So to start, you're going to want to know your wombo combo. Essentially, you want to use your glacier grenades not as a means of necessarily freezing someone. If you freeze them, sure, it's nice, whatever, but it's not the objective. You want to throw it down near your target as close as possible, of course, and then use your shatter dive immediately while you're in the air to dive down on the glacier grenade that you set and detonate it and make a massive explosion that'll usually kill the target. And you want to get used to using this as both an aggressive and defensive maneuver. I use it mainly defensively because there is a good amount of risk in it. When you do slam the ground, you're left pretty vulnerable, so it requires you to really overcommit to the target that you want to shatter. And normally by doing this, you have between a 5.5 to 6.5 meter kill radius essentially, but with our Whisper of Fissures fragment, that increases it to about 7.5, maybe 8 meter radius, which is pretty massive. So for this build of the Revenant, because we're going all in on our shatter, obviously Whisper of Fissures is very good. We also have the Whisper of Shards, which is very good as well for being able to loop this wombo combo. Basically, when we shatter a stasis crystal, including the glacier grenade that we put down ourselves to do the wombo combo, when we shatter that, we get 10 seconds of drastically increased grenade recharge rate to get our grenade back frequently again, to allow us to keep looping this wombo combo, again using it both defensively and aggressively. And the boosted grenade recharge rate also works from shattering your teammates' crystals as well as enemy crystals. When you're using the shatter focus build though, you don't want to just be tunnel visioned on this one wombo combo. Remember what I said about the glacier grenades. The context of them is the fact that you can use them to make cover whenever you need it, whether it be to peek shot or stay safe. You can use it to make platforms and get angles, and you have to think about all these functions in combination with your shatter dive and the wombo combo you can use aggressively or defensively, and with shatter dive as an evasive movement as well. These are all different potential plays you have to make, and it's going to change based on every scenario. Now that we talked about a more shatter focused build, we can talk about a slow focused build. The objective of this style of a build is to manipulate your enemy's movement, whether they're being aggressive on you and you want to stop their push, or to limit their movement and open up a push. And you want to do this by properly utilizing a bunch of different sources and ways you have to slow them and combine those stacks ultimately to even freeze them and convert on kills. So for this build, you want to be using the dust field grenades because, as I mentioned before, this is the best grenade to use to manipulate your opponent's movements and counter them, as well as, of course, it does add stacks of slow, which you can combine with different slow abilities on your class to freeze them. For our fragments, you want to be using Whisper of Durance. This gives you a plus 10 strength for free, and it increases the duration of your slow abilities. This includes your Shurikens, which go from 2 seconds of slow to 4 seconds of slow, and it does also include your Duskfield grenade, so it gives it a longer duration overall. We also want to use the Whisper of Refraction because defeating slowed or frozen targets grants you class ability energy, and this is really important because this is going to allow you to loop your dodge to slow, and when you defeat a slow target, it's going to give you your dodge back. So essentially, you can Duskfield someone and then dodge near them or Shuriken them, freeze them, defeat them, get your dodge back, and continue to be really evasive, but also just keep looping those abilities that are going to allow you to manipulate enemies' movements and essentially freeze them ultimately, because the dodge with Gambler's Dodge is going to get you back charges of your Shuriken. You can keep combining your dodge and your Shurikens to slow or freeze targets. So now for a more well-balanced build, I think the Glacier Grenade is the choice. It gives you a very, very high skill ceiling. I think the highest of the 3 grenades, and it does have direct synergy with Shatter Dive. And our dodge to slow, or anticipated dodge to slow, will have synergy inherently with our stasis Shuriken. So for our fragments, we're going to use Whisper of Durance to give a little bit more added duration to the slow effect of our dodge and our Shuriken, so it's easier to combine them to freeze. And then we're going to use the Whisper of Shards, so shattering stasis crystals with our Shatter Dive boosts our grenade recharge rate so we can keep looping our cover, platform, or wombo combo essentially. I think the well-balanced build will be the best, again, because you have the Shuriken and dodge working together to slow targets and then giving them a little bit more potency, but you still have the whole Shatter Dive wombo combo, maybe even after you slow them, and all the potential of the glaciers to make platforms, cover, take good angles, be defensive, be aggressive at the same time. I think overall that's going to be the best way to play the class. As for exotic choices, I thought I'd quickly cover this. I think Mask of Bakris is a very obvious one. That shift is incredibly powerful, even though it does give you a pretty hefty additional penalty to your cooldown. The fastest you can get it if you're staying alive is 21 seconds, 11 seconds from the fastest dodge cooldown, plus the 10-second penalty of Mask of Bakris. So if you're using that, you want to go for 10 mobility and nothing less. Mask of Bakris is especially strong with the Shatter Dive wombo combo because when you do the wombo combo, you're left in a moment of vulnerability where you're coming out of the animation of having slammed the ground. So Mask of Bakris lets you instantly kind of negate that and teleport away back into cover, so there's less risk in being able to use your Shatter Dive wombo combo. We are, however, uncertain right now if this will work with dodge to slow or not. We'll have to wait and see. Another directly very synergistic exotic is going to be Sixth Coyote. This really lends itself to the slow build a lot, or if you're looking for just a consistent dodge, this gives you that so much more frequently, being able to get your shurikens more frequently and eventually dodge to slow that much more frequently, while of course breaking aim assist and staying evasive is incredibly powerful. This also allows you to play with a little lower mobility if you want to min-max, because you're going to have more dodges more frequently, which kind of counteracts the dodge cooldown nerfs. The Bombardiers are a surprisingly synergistic combo. Again, with the anticipated dodge to slow, you can slow them and have a little bit of additional damage to them on top of that just for dodging. And I think this exotic would really help you play into the defensive aspect of a slow focused build. I'm going to also quickly address that no, Gemini Jesters is not a good option for this. If you have someone slowed, you don't need their radar gone as well. That is just a win more. And I think absolutely no one should be surprised that Stompies are a great pairing for this as well, especially for the Shatter focused class, simply because you're able to kind of close the gap in the air and get more elevation, and that definitely lets you play more to the aggressive aspect of the Shatter Dive Wombo combo. So lastly, let's talk stats. I'm going to go over my personal build and show you guys the kind of stats you might want to be aiming for and the importance of them. Firstly, we're going to have 8 mobility. I said 10 earlier, I know, but you want 8 if you're using a lightweight weapon, and the Chaperone and Might Multi-Tool are the 2 best lightweight weapons in the game. They add 2 tiers of mobility, and yes, this does affect your dodge cooldown, so you can go 8 to min-max with those weapons if you plan on using them, or if you see value in min-maxing with that, since lightweight hand cannons are no longer a thing. 5 resilience is the new breakpoint to hit. It stops the 120 RPM 1 crit 2 body. It also stops Thorn and all of its damage over time perks. It stops the 1 body shot empowering rift with the high impact snipers, and it allows you to break out of stasis freeze with some shields and not getting into the red health. On my build, I have 9 recovery. 10 is favorable, but 9 is the lowest you can go to truly min-max if you'd like to, because 9 is still very competitive with 10 recovery. I covered this in a video a long time ago, but if you want to drop to 9 to free up stats in other categories and other abilities that can have a high impact, like maybe mobility, then definitely go for it. On my build, I have 9 discipline. I would maybe even take this to 10 if I could, because the Glacier Grenade and having that in every scenario possible is incredibly important. Being able to use it and just dispose of it like nothing is incredibly important because of all the application it has. I have 5 intellect, but honestly, I'd like less than that. If I can take some intellect, put that into recovery or discipline, I would. It just happens to be the level I have. I don't think you want any lower than 3 or 4 on the Stasis Hunter, and you don't need much more than that. And as for strength, because we have Gambler's Dodge, which actually does work with Mask of Bacchus even, we don't really need a lot of strength because dodging is going to get our shurikens back for us, so that's not a priority. As far as mods go, a lot of them do depend on the weapons you're using, and they're pretty preferential in terms of what targeting you want and in terms of if you want to be running a charge with light build. But some that I can recommend as standard is that you want to be using double impact induction. This makes it so when you get hits with your shuriken, you get nearly, I want to say, a third to half of your grenade back, which again, I stress the importance of having your grenades very frequently. This helps that and gives more synergy to your build and loops your build more. I also like running double bomber on my class item because it allows you to get about an eighth to maybe a quarter of your grenade back as well, simply just for dodging and playing as you'd normally play, which allows you again to loop your abilities better and have better uptime on all aspects of your toolbox. Anyways, right now that's all I've got for you guys. That is all the information and little tips that I can offer for the Hunter Stasis Revenant subclass and to play it effectively. I hope you guys enjoyed the video. Check out my Fire mixtape, twitch.tv/Drewskis. Hope to see you there. Thanks for watching again. Take care, everyone.